Welcome to Fix My Business, the show that helps you fix your business. I'm your host, Scott Todd. I've built multiple seven-figure businesses, and we want to help you do the same thing. We want to help you figure out how to improve your business so that you can grow it and scale it to be whatever you want. Now, today is a special episode because I'm going to do a build session with a real estate investor. His name is Chad. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a problem that he had with his lead, his initial lead intake. He had a problem a couple months ago. It was a very good problem because he was overwhelmed with all the leads that they received in their business. And today we're going to walk through what happened, and then we're going to build for him an automation, and we're going to use the build with scale framework. All right, so let's just jump into it, and I'll see you at the end. All right, Chad, how you doing today?
Good. Good morning, Scott. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you. All right, Chad. So the reason that I encouraged you to be on here with me today is to do a build session. Okay. Because it came to my attention that back in February, you and your wife who own a company ran into a lead problem that blew up your system. Right?
Yes, correct. So we had started a land flipping business. You know, we buy and sell land, and we had been advertising through a variety of channels. Had some challenges. We started using landmodo.com and had a tremendous amount of success very quickly. And it kind of caught us off guard. We, had been kind of preparing for things, but when it all started coming in, we started realizing all these challenges, bottlenecks and things that we were doing that we would probably prefer not to do, to kind of to keep our leads moving, flowing through our system. So yeah, exciting problem to have, but a problem nevertheless.
Yeah. And if I hear correctly, it literally, you had too many leads that broke your system, right? Like you guys couldn't keep up. You were, getting stuff done weeks and weeks later, which is, as you pointed out, is a great problem to have, right?
Yeah, great problem, but still a problem.
So, what I love about what you guys did is you identified the problem, okay? And you didn't stop and try to fix the problem right then and there. You triaged it, right? Like you went out and you solved the problem. You identified it. You continued to just work with the system that you had.
Yep.
And then as you got time back, it was identified as a key priority for you guys, a vital need, that then you're now able to circle back and think about, okay, well, how do we fix this the right way?
Exactly.
Yeah. And the one thing I see business owners do a lot of times is, number one, they might just stop production right then and there and say, hey, I got to solve this problem first, right? Like that, deep down inside, that sometimes feels like the right thing to do. But the proper way to do it is like what you guys did, which is, okay, noted, triage it. We're going to limp along. Okay. We're going to limp along. And then when time allows, we're going to circle back and come choose the problem or attack the problem, right?
Exactly. And having a way to document the problems as you go is really important, obviously, so you don't lose track of the pain that you felt. When you get past these things, sometimes you can forget and you move on to the next thing. And then if you're constantly trying to solve as you go, sometimes you don't do the highest priority things. You just do what's right in front of you, and you lose that ability to sort of step back and look at the system as a whole and say, what do we need to fix next to really make our business better and sort of progress us sort of holistically.
Yeah. And, I think what you just said is so key. You have to have a way of capturing, I call it capturing the frictions, right? Because if you identify each of these frictions and you have some methodology in which you capture them, which it can be, it can be very analog, which is just on paper. Okay. Just take out a piece of paper and write down all of the frictions that you see in a given day. The other way of doing it is you can get more technical and, do things like in, a Kanban board where, you're looking at things and you're like, oh, let's just track all of these things. The way that you do it is really up to you. How do you do it? Tell me how you do it.
So I happen to come from a pretty significant process improvement background. I have Lean and Six Sigma experience. I really love Lean tools. I'm a sort of a student of process improvement, and I use technology to do that. So I know what it means to map the process first and then take off after the problems. So we had a very simple swim lane diagram for our processes. When we started running into problems, I created a value stream map and I started capturing all the specific things that we do, and looking at value add, non-value add time, and the tools we're using, and the just the handoffs in the process. So I happen to have that background, and I have some tool sets at my disposal. But the most important thing usually to me is that when something happens, you're just capturing the pain. So at least you capture the pain, and then later you can go back and build out the nice value stream map and things like that. And I can do that quickly. So it's not a real problem, but I think it's, again, the most important thing is to capture the pain, and whatever your tool set, you can go back and figure that out later.
Yeah. One of the things that, because I find the way that you're working interesting. One of the things that I do is I use a tool called Obsidian. It's like a Notion. It's it's a note system. I like Obsidian. But what I'll do in Obsidian is I will, throughout my day, because I have a daily report there where I'm making notes, or tasks that I've done, completed, or things that I see. I actually go in there and I create a friction. I actually write like an open bracket, friction, double colon. That way I can have data views and whatever. I'm not going to go down
Yep.
that route. But
Yeah.
I think that the most important part is that you capture it. Okay. Because if you're not capturing it, you're going to forget it. And I love what you said. It's really about, hey, let's circle back, find the highest value obstacle that we can remove, and then we remove it, and then we go back and we solve that problem once and for all, right? Or at least we think,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So the friction that you identified was, kind of the leads process was broken. That's kind of what I'm hearing. The lead process was broken. So that's what I would capture when I circle back to it. I'm looking at this. And then the way that I do it is I actually go through the scale framework, and I'll kind of introduce the scale framework to you. But the scale framework is essentially 5 letters. They're 5 acronym. It's one acronym, 5 letters. And it basically says scale. We're going to start with the scope, because Chad, as you know, you could easily over engineer something. You can try to build out the entire system for something, but really the way I is, it's a play. It's from here to here, right? We're not trying to go from one end of the football field to the other. We're just trying to run one play. Okay. So we want to make sure we're scoping it correctly. Then we're going to clarify the flow. And what I mean by that is we're going to map out what triggers it, what comes in, and what the intended goal of this particular play is.
Exactly.
The A is we're going to automate the trigger. So in this case, a lead coming in, the trigger is the lead generation, somebody submitting a lead to you. The L is leverage the data. We want to know that the process worked or it didn't work, that our play worked or didn't work. And then E is elevate the experience. And what I mean by that is, one, if we're going to have something communicating in a form letter kind of style to a customer, we want to make sure that it doesn't sound robotic. We want to make sure that it sounds human. It sounds like Chad, right? The other
exactly.
is that if there's an error, we want to make sure that it's not some, system lingo like signal 19 error. What is that? Right. Okay. So that's the way I'm thinking about it. And what we'll do is we'll just start off here, and we'll start off with the scope, the S. So how do you see the scope?
That's interesting. I think it's initial lead. So we had a totally different workflow, and we moved to having leads coming in through the SiteLand Moto that you may be familiar with. And so we would see a lead come in, and we didn't really have a good way to kind of start our whole. We didn't have a plan for how we reach out to customers and or potential customers, leads really, and kind of go through the journey with them. So as we started reaching out, we got different questions. They would, then we realized, oh, we need some data that we need to gather for that everybody's asking for. Let's figure out how we do that. And then we had repeated questions that we're answering over and over again. So the first 2 or 3 things we say to somebody are pretty routine. There's really no value add in like the interactions we're having. They're just trying to get the relationship up and running. So, and then, as we got into the process, there were, things we needed to do to close a transaction with our customers. They might, we have to potentially generate a deed or generate a note or, talk just some of the conversations about financing and things like that. But a lot of it was very focused on, we have counties that we work in and they have rules and regulations. And so people are asking a lot of routine questions. And that was really a lot of it, is helping people understand what they're looking at if they're looking at buying land, and, what some of the limitations are and what opportunities they have when they purchase a particular piece of land.
Yeah. So if we go back and we look at something like this, really the scope that I'm hearing you say is it's really about the initial lead response, right?
Exactly. Yes.
It's not trying to craft an entire sales message.
Right.
Like, hey, we get the lead in. What is the first thing that we want to do? And I think that's, we're not trying to boil the ocean here. All we're trying to do is solve this one friction point, because then we can daisy chain it into multiple sequence of plays. But for now, what we're going to look at today is that initial lead response, right?
That's exactly right. The real challenge for us was getting somebody qualified to like that we're a good fit for them. They're a good fit for the land that we have to buy, and getting them on the phone. And that way we can have, kind of do some initial, I guess you'd call it filtering. And then so when we get them on the phone, that it's a really good conversation. That was really the scope of what we were trying to do.
Okay. All right. So when we talk about clarifying the flow here, we know that your initial trigger, if you will, is going to be an email, right? Because it's
correct.
Probably going to come in from an email. And then we want to think about that desired. Try to see if I can make this here. How can I do this? Let's see. How do I make this? Oh, look at that. Yeah, there we go. Now I can go out a little bit more. Okay. So we have this initial goal of getting the email, and then the end goal is not necessarily to make the sale. I know that's what you want. You want to make the sale, but really the end goal in this case is just a response back to the person who's inquiring, right? It's that initial.
Exactly.
So, whatever it is. And so this email trigger may contain questions. It may contain certain things. So what we're just do here is we're just trying to get it to where we get that response back out to them. And as we start to think about how that happens, there's lots of nuances that could happen, because, if you wanted it to be very cold, well, then it would just be a robotic answer that says, hi, we have your lead. How can we help you? Or hi,
right,
we help you. But I think you want to go further than that, right? Like you want to do something different.
Yeah. I mean, when you, the first response is really important. The timing of it is really important. And that's one of the things that creates urgency and sort of made us drop what we were doing and start to deal with this. But I think the quality of that interaction is incredibly important. It sets the whole tone for how you're working with someone. It lets them know, who you are and how what their whole experience with us is going to be. So that the tone and quality of that is really important.
So do you envision like having AI write those based on the initial response?
Well, what's really funny is one of the things that we started doing was actually using AI to write our responses, but we were taking what they would ask, type it in, get a response, send it, put it back to them. And so as we were actually kind of doing it, is like we're doing, because we had so many coming in, a lot of times they might ask a specific question and we had a number of crafted responses. And at first it was copy paste some things, and then it was, okay, let's use AI to tailor it. And so we were, again, you're moving so fast sometimes and you got a lot of things going on. Somebody asks a very specific question and we pull in maybe specific county information or other information that we'd already, again, we ended up loading it to AI. So we were starting to go down that road, but it was still very manual with us in the loop.
Yeah. So, where we are with technology today, technology is changing every single day. What was not available yesterday is available today. And that's why we never really want to jump to the actual solution tool, because tomorrow you might get shiny object syndrome and want to go chase, never have anything that works. So we try to stay like, hey, we want to know what this flow looks like, and then we can start to layer in how the tools might work, right? And so really when I do a build session like this, I'm just thinking about it like a blueprint,
right?
Like a blueprint for a builder who's going to go build a home, right? Because we know what the framing looks like. Now what we need to do is we need to actually get some boots on the ground and go, and then figure out like how we're going to put that in there, right? So as we think this through, the email comes in, and ultimately what we want to do is we want to have, like AI triage that email. Is that
exactly?
How you? Yeah. So we want to have
exactly.
AI, whatever AI model you want or whatever you think would work today, you want to have that triage it. And while it's doing that, it could potentially pull knowledge. I'll just put this over here. It could pull knowledge from your internal records on rules of that county, right? Rules of the county, property information, all of that stuff. And, I think that the approach that you're doing there, where if you stop and say, hey, listen, here's the counties that we're working in, here's the zoning rules, here's, the rules that we understand, some properties might be in a property owners association where they have their own deed restrictions, taking all of that stuff and providing that into a knowledge bank that the AI can pull from. Now it can look at that question and then it can turn around and create the response, right? So
exactly.
Then the question is would you have a human look at the response, or are you just letting it go?
Well, so this is what's interesting. I think that the important thing for us is that the responses are, whether automated or human, that they are very valuable for the folks that are getting them, and that they don't feel robotic, that they are, again, truly like what someone would expect, and maybe even exceeding their expectations if possible. That's kind of our philosophy across the board. So I think what we like to do is say, if we can use AI to do something and it can exceed expectations, or at least kind of like, meet them where they're at, and kind of give them what they need, then that's a plus. Let's move forward with that. And if it can't, then let's figure out how we tune that and optimize as we move forward. And so a lot of times it's, us sort of, walking through things with AI and curating the responses. And then when we see that they get good enough and we've got enough information coming in that the responses can be, very good and very quick, then I think we're ready to release that piece to allow AI to do the work. But we're a little conservative about things. Like, we want to make sure that, again, the experience for folks is good, especially in the early stages. But that's kind of an approach throughout our journey. And that's, that was one of the things that was hard for me. My immediate thought was, let me go gather a bunch of information. Let me create this knowledge base. Let me do all this stuff. And getting into the solutioning side, where I had to just kind of accept that, Cindy is using an AI, that's, she's using maybe Chat GPT and I'm using Claude, and we're using different ones. And yeah, the data is not all centralized and it's not organized, but we're figuring this out as we go. And so that was kind of our approach.
Yeah. Okay. And so this is really where, you start to think about, and I think that everybody should think about, because the initial gut feeling that people have is they just want it done. Right. And so they AI to triage it. They want that AI to draft the response, and that produces the response right here. But at the end of the day, really, I think that we have to always remember that we need the human in the loop in some way. And it's one of the things that drives me crazy is when I hear people that are like, I have no employees, and AI, or you see in the news where companies are laying off all these employees and they're citing, oh, we don't need them anymore because of AI. Well, maybe you need less people. I get that part. Maybe you need less people, but at the end of the day, there will be a competitive advantage to being able to deal with a human as opposed to a robot. I mean, that's already the case today. I mean, if you think about it, if you call up to any major company and you go through their voice response system, like how many times are you like, just give me a human. I want a human. Okay. And you keep hearing, oh, check out our website. If I could do this on your website, I wouldn't be calling. Trust me. I could do this on you. But if I'm calling you, I need you to answer the phone. I think it's the same. There's going to be a premium for that human experience, and it will be a competitive advantage that we don't just want to take and have the bots of the world just communicating everything. And so I like the fact that you're keeping the human there. Okay. So now we keep that human in the loop to make sure that we're getting the response that we want, that it sounds like us, all of that good stuff. And then what? So like the human looks at it and says, yeah, I'm good to go. But now what are we doing? Are we just sending it? Or is there something else that we should be doing here?
I mean, for us, it was just, if it's an email response, we would send that to them. If it's a text response, if they wanted to be, use text messaging, which a lot of people do, we would just, start texting them. And so we would craft the response, make sure it makes sense, send it out to them. And there was usually a little bit of back and forth. It wasn't usually just one message. It was usually maybe 2 or 3 fairly standard messages. And our goal is to get them on the phone. That's like the first thing, but there tends to be, like most people, they want to text or email back and forth a little bit and sort of get a feel for things before they get on the phone.
Yeah. I think that's the other piece too, is like, how do you want to communicate? How, like that's one of the early like dances I think that you have to do with lead generation, is you have to figure out, okay, like, hey, you want to be where they want to be. And
right.
What you don't want to do is you don't want to say, well, we only communicate through email, right? Because I mean, there's people that communicate in many different ways. You need to show up where they are in the format that they want to show up with, right? So I think that's a good key point. Yeah. Okay. So, I'm going to put in here, like we're really meeting them where they are in terms of communication method. And it's the method is there. So it's not always an email, but we have that communication method, which leads us to our response, our initial response. And, in doing this, where you have the AI triaging something and drafting it based on the knowledge that it has, really the time that you gain in doing this is really just shifted. And this is where I think that people lose sight of the human in the loop, is that, yeah, you want the human in the loop to figure out not only where it's going wrong. Yeah. If it's correct, just ship it. But if it's going wrong, this is where we want to pause and strengthen back up the knowledge base.
Yes, exactly.
How many times do people miss that?
Yeah.
And
a lot
of the AI, but they don't ever stop with the newfound time and then go back and say, hey, here, let's firm this up. Because Chad, I mean, if you're working in the same county for years to come, it's really an investment of like that regulation's not necessarily going to change overnight, right? Like it's something that you once, and it's going to last you for years. Right. Yeah,
exactly.
Put in the institutional knowledge. Okay. So we've clarified the flow. We kind of have an idea of what we want to do here. And then what we want to think about next is how we're going to automate the trigger. And what I mean by that is automate the trigger. And what I mean is that so many times really there's four triggers in the world. There's four triggers that trigger everything. Number one is an event. Okay, an event is basically something that's happened. Could be a calendar event. Could be somebody submits something. That's an event. We can have time as a trigger. Okay, time is a trigger. Monday at 8 a.m. is a trigger. An event is a trigger. A condition, like, hey, it's going to be 90 degrees outside today and it's going to rain. Well, then send me a message that tells me to bring my umbrella. That's a condition.
Exactly.
And the last one is manual. And so many times it's easier to build those manual triggers, but the reality is that a manual trigger is the worst trigger because it requires somebody to remember, and we're going to forget. Yes. Right. Yep. So I think that the approach that you're having there in terms of the event being the submission is, it's logical in this case, right?
Yep.
Without it, you're reliant on an employee to go into their email and check for emails, and you're counting on them to go do it, which they may not do. So clearly what we're going to do here is the event. The trigger is the event. It's the submission or the receipt of that email is what we're going to do there. Okay. Yep. All right. Leverage the data. So this is where we're going to plan failure. And what I mean by that is, where can this process fail? Like, it can fail because you may not get an email, which is your trigger. That's a potential. Look, email is email, right? So, how do you know that you don't get an email, right? Like, how would you know if you didn't know? Like, you just don't know. It's just not there. But this is where like a regular check of whatever system sends that email is going to be your friend. Because if you have a regular, automated task that says, hey, let me go up there and schedule, let me just go look to make sure that we're getting everything we need, and then we can alert it. How do you know that the AI failed to trigger off of this? And, even humans, if you're going to outsource this or provide it to somebody else, how do you know that the human is not the bottleneck now, right? Like, and that's the way that we want to think about it, is each step along the way, we want to think about there's data being produced on each individual step. And we want to know if something's not right? Like, we want to know if something's not there. So what are your thinking behind that?
Yeah, so this is really important to me. I think when you start to automate a process, like you said, you have to keep humans in the loop. I think the key that makes this work is that you have a structure for how the humans are involved. So I like to create queues and work tasks and things like that, so that people don't have to remember something. They have something that becomes not just a routine, but it becomes something where they can be prompted in some way. So, in this case, it would be, hey, instead of just checking Land Moto constantly, you check it maybe twice a day or once a day, just to make sure nobody slipped through the cracks. And then it's scheduled, it's routine, it's very calm, it's very much just something you do. And you don't have to constantly think, oh my gosh, did I forget? Oh my gosh, did a new lead come in? So that's kind of what I'd see in that particular case is once a day you check, Land Moto, make sure you didn't miss anybody, that an email, didn't come out, go astray or something like that. And then, hopefully you can, begin to trust that process over time. But again, regular checks are an important thing. And if they're scheduled, they don't take much. And if you schedule a number of tasks, then you've got a really set thing that you can do, and your life is very relaxed and you have a very predictable flow to your day.
Yeah. And see, this is where it's easy to over automate or over engineer something too, Chad, because as you're saying that, the thing that's going through my mind is, yeah, we could have a human go and check this website to see if all the leads are accounted for, or we could build, an AI automation that logs in and checks to make sure that all the leads are accounted for. But see, that's the risk. Okay. That is where so many people go down this rabbit hole of automation, because the easiest thing to do today is the human in the loop. And that's fine. Okay. Because as you build this out, in my opinion, what we're doing is we're staying within this framework that we've identified. We're staying true to this scope. And the fact that we're potentially saying, hey, we want an automation that goes and validates this, that's a separate play.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
that's a separate whole build session. That is a completely separate conversation that's not for today, but yet it links to today.
Right. Well, I think what's interesting about that too is that the concept of plays. When you kind of mentioned like AI is changing jobs, but I think it's changing the workforce, but it's really changing. I think in some cases you might downscale your workforce and not have to have as many people, but in a lot of cases you want to shift what they're doing. And I think this is an important piece of this. So for example, we talked about the knowledge base and how that can help AI get better and everything like that. If you have a human that once a day goes and checks and says, did everything go out? Well, that's probably very fast. And generally speaking, it's going to work. It's just a quick check. But if you can also make that a checkpoint to say, let's review a few of the messages and make sure that they're getting proper responses. And then let's identify if maybe there's some opportunities to shore up our knowledge base. Then you've got like a micro play that you do instead of, a macro play, and you can just check your knowledge base, start to tune that up. And you can use that as kind of a trigger for really enriching your knowledge base as you're sort of checking to make sure that operations are moving smoothly. So I like to kind of combine things and think of these new plays. And then again, you can go back and automate later. But if you try to do all of it at once, it can get very overwhelming. And I think your systems can get very convoluted.
Yeah. It reminds me, as you're talking about the micro plays, when I started building my business, 12 years ago, and the technology wasn't anywhere close to what it is today, we relied heavily on, humans and VAs. And the problem that I kept seeing people run into when they were trying to build a VA team is that they would just take all of this work and be like, here. What I always said is, hey, wait. If you're going to give an assignment to somebody, what's the smallest micro step? I think in micro steps, right? Like, here, let's go build this one little piece that I want them to go do. And then they go do this over and over and over again. And then it's like, okay, cool. You've done part one, but yet there's another 9 parts to go. So now let's work on two and 3 now, right? So now you've got them like they're launching stronger, then they go learn 2 and 3, and then they go learn all the rest of the steps. And I slowly would hand the work off to them. And it's the same way with automation, because we can't try to automate the entire system. I mean, you could.
Exactly.
It's not going to work. You're not going to be happy with it.
No, and I think one of the things that's really important is that even if you are building a system, you have to design that system. And so if you're teaching the same way you would teach people, to learn a new process and a new system, and especially with AI, you have that opportunity to use that same thinking, but you still have to be methodical and you have to plan that out. And you may not know what the instructions are right in the beginning, and you may not know what's going to work with a particular person or a particular AI. So I think you have to be very methodical and have a way that, again, you roll that out. I love the way you think about that.
Yeah. So for leveraging the data, we're going to say, hey, we're going to build in some of those checks, but we're also going to have humans overseeing some of the processes in the beginning before we can later then go back and further automate the humans overseeing it to go do the right. So we're going to have a human oversee it today because that's the micro step. That's the easiest way to go. And then later on, as we look at new frictions that arrive in the business, the new frictions might be these humans that are overseeing some of this automated work that we can go build the automation, right?
Exactly.
Back down to elevating the experience. And this is the voice. And one of the things I think that you mentioned that you were doing that I like that you said that you were doing is that you're having AI kind of draft or triage that message, draft the response for the human to go back and look to make sure, is this the messaging that we want? Does this sound like us? So, you're kind of doing that, but we all know that, well, I shouldn't say we all know, it is pretty common knowledge that, look, you can have AI kind of build a voice guide for you, learn from your own writing. That's really 2 years ago, that would have been wild 2 years ago, right? Today it's like, I want it to sound more like me, not like a robot. And we have that part, but what are your thoughts on that?
Um, ask me that question again. I hear a couple things I wanted to respond to, but
When you're thinking about elevating the experience and you're going to have
yeah,
AI out there and draft that response, how
yeah,
are you, number one, finding or helping AI to find your voice? Okay, because you want to
yes.
that part, and then the second part is really how are you going to elevate the experience, or how do you think you're going to elevate the experience for the customer and for you to know that something's wrong?
Yeah, I think the key is that for AI to find your voice, you really have to have like a body of responses and things that ways that you talk, ways you respond, information you provide in a given context, things like that. And I think that's kind of a skill set all on its own. It's almost in many ways it is a lot like teaching a person. You want to show them. Maybe you have recordings of calls you've made, or you have, recording of something you do so they can see how you do it. And you have templates maybe of things that you've responded to in the past. You give it to a person, and that person reads it and says, oh, okay, I get what they're saying. I understand the way they respond. AI is kind of the same way. You've got to gather some information and really have a structured way to provide feedback loops so that it can improve over time. And really, to me, that's the key. I think that if you just throw AI at something, and you don't do at least some, you have to have some amount of human in the loop to make sure it's working properly. But I think you also have to have those feedback mechanisms either by a person or, in place with responses to say, this is a good response, this is a bad response, this is how this worked. And I think if you can build that sort of curation, then I think you can get to a point where you can say, okay, that's good enough, and I trust that that will stay good enough so that it's responding to people in a way that's in keeping with our voice, our brand, and kind of the way we expect to treat our customers.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Very good point. So that's the whole part, right? Like we want to think through before we jump into the tools and we start to jump into these, building all of these automations. I want us to slow down and to think through what we're going to do, because when you do it this way, it's a repeatable system, and it all starts with a signal that, hey, something's wrong in our business. We need to capture that friction point, and then when we go and we sit down, we spend a little bit of time. Like we've spent like 40 minutes chit chatting about this process, which is not that really that long of an investment to go
Right.
now have some framework. But the number one mistake I see people making when it comes to AI and really automation is that they just want to jump in and start designing. That's fun, right? Like they just want to start connecting all these tools together, but they haven't thought about these pieces. And then this whole system, this whole play becomes way too large. And
Absolutely.
right, like, and then they're defeated. Okay, so
Exactly. If you just brought a person in off the street and said, here's my business, go get at it, and they have no training, you don't know what they do, you don't know what they're good at, it's kind of the same thing as just throwing AI at something. You'll get some response, you'll get something that's better than what you do right now, but it's a very, very point like solution. And if you step back and are able to think about the system as a whole, then it kind of helps you make decisions about what's the right thing to do in a given situation, and what's the right level of automation you need to go after.
yeah, you're crushing it, man. You got it. You got it. So congratulations to you guys. I cannot wait for you to put this into practice, this initial response. And
Yep, I'm excited.
to share with me kind of the timing improvements or anything else, because we all want to know.
Awesome. Well, I'll do that. I appreciate the time, Scott. It's great to have this conversation.
All right. Good to see you, Chad. Well, there you go. I had a lot of fun doing that with Chad. And I hope that the one takeaway that you got from this is we don't just want to jump into automation. What we want to do is we want to capture our friction points. We have to have some way of capturing these things, because otherwise we will forget them. We want to capture the friction points, and then we can think about how we can build automations. And if you don't know how to build the automation on your own, don't worry. There's people out there that can help you. There are people that can help you do it. You don't have to do everything on your own. And I want to help you continue to build the business that you want. If you have a business question, a business challenge, head over to scotttodd.net/ask and let's connect. And if you want your own build session, well, that's possible too. I'll see you in our next episode.